Hey, this is Brendan from Comic Con. Today, sitting here with me today is Morgan Jon Fox, director of The Hobby, a documentary that's presented by Documentary Plus, available on Friday, February 16th on on-demand services. You'll be able to watch it on Apple Plus and anywhere else that you can watch those. The Hobby is a character-driven, feel-good deep dive into the high-stakes, eccentric world of card collecting. Good morning, Morgan. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and excited to talk about the hobby today.
So, I mean, I think everybody's at least peripherally aware of card collecting. I mean, we were collecting cards, Donruss and Tops and stuff when I was a kid, but it's really just kind of exploded over the last few years, and it's up into the stratosphere with those guys that are collecting sneakers and all kinds of. What have you seen in this world of card collecting?
It's definitely not our 90s. I also, started collecting back then, Donruss, Tops, baseball cards. So, the Jose Canseco rookie card or the David Robinson rookie card were the things that I sought after so hugely. And this is definitely not the same hobby as it was then. Obviously, things have changed. Not only the prices have changed on these cards, the industry itself is starting to advertise a lot, and so many new companies and auction houses and breakers. There's so many things that have exploded that it's really hard, I think, for folks that just collected back in the day during the explosion in the 90s. They might have a little difficulty sort of getting educated about what's going on in the hobby these
Mm,
days. And I think part of this documentary is it kind of does that job of catching people up. But the biggest things that change is like during the pandemic when people assumed that collecting cards, paying money to collect cards would not be a thing that would explode. The opposite happened, and people got extremely interested in card collecting again, and prices started to skyrocket, and demand, uh, you know, went through the roof in such a way that people could go into Target and buy a little box of cards for $40 and go on the internet and sell it for $100.
mhm.
Records were set. A Mickey Mantle card sold for $12 million. Michael Jordan rookie cards were selling for $800,000. Charizards were selling for $300,000. Pokemon cards. So, kind of hard to fathom, and we can get into a little bit of the what and the why of those specific types of numbers. But certainly a wild, interesting world. And then, of course, when in any hobby or any industry explodes like that, there's some shady stuff that gets involved. People want to
Mhm.
scam or make money or take advantage of people. And so we cover a little bit of that as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a documentary about a pastime, a hobby that's been around for 100 years. And it gives tribute to that history as well as the new generation of collectors and companies that are in the space.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and it's really interesting too. I was just talking about this with my producer before he came on. I was doing the research for it, and all of these different groups were popping up for Facebook and things like that in my timeline, showing me all these. And there's hundreds of them, and you look at it, and these objects have zero intrinsic value. I've got these baseballs back here. They're probably worth what, 80 cents each, but then somebody holds it and they put their name on it, and all of a sudden it's worth money. And we have that same dynamic in comics and collectibles where there are people who just enjoy the thing. These are all 2010, 2012, 2014 Giants and a couple of Hall of Famers. That's why I collect. It's not for, an investment or anything like that. Then you've got the collectors who are looking to complete a set. And then you've got, these people who are trying to turn it to make money. So there's a whole business here. There are people that do this as a job.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing that's kind of wild. I think, you had your traditional dealers, card shop owners, and people that would go to the weekend card shows that have always kind of had it. Maybe some of them were lucky enough to have a job, but most of them did it as a passion, as a hobby. On the weekends or whatever else. And now it has turned into there's a full blown workforce of folks involved in this, whether it's literally going to card shows every weekend because there's multiple card shows every weekend, probably in whatever city of a certain size that you're in. But then also just the amount of card shops, as well as just giant industry, giant companies have gotten involved
Mhm,
to serve, this sort of major push. And we're definitely seeing advertising in a way that we've never seen before, which I
mhm,
think is good. I mean, I know a lot of people who are sort of from the old guard, gatekeep a little bit, and I get it. They don't like the sort of newfangled, and especially people that are just here to flip and make a quick buck.
mhm,
Um, and I think that's a part of the conversation of the documentary. Is like these old school collectors who are like just trying to
mhm,
put together sets, and then the investors, which in some ways, this old school collectors who want just the sets and want to sort of get the newest version of whatever it might be, and they've been doing it for years. Well, it becomes harder to do when you have investors and flippers involved,
Mhm.
because the prices go up, and it's harder for these, and passion collectors to complete the sets and do that kind of thing. But you're
Mhm.
right; it spans comic. I think that's what's interesting to me, is that there's so much crossover now. Like if you go to any random card show, sure, there's the traditional baseball cards, football cards, basketball cards, but you will have many booths there with Pokemon cards or other TCG, Magic the
Mhm.
Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh, or some of the newer Disney Lorcana. Um, Metazoo, rest in peace. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That was here and went already, but then there'll be folks with comics, and that kind of thing. And I think there's a bigger crossover than there maybe
Mhm.
used to be, which I think is really nice. Like you're here for some baseball cards, but wait, see comics. You used to collect them as a
Mhm.
kid, and maybe you'll grab some comics. And I did that very thing. Like I did not collect comics as a kid, but since getting into collecting and sort of like making this documentary and seeing how cool some comics that brought back some memories, I was like, I started buying some comics and stuff.
Nice, nice. And we've noticed that at comics conventions, at New York Comic Con in October, I purchased the black balls that are in here. Came in a blind set. I got a Bob Gibson in there. Um, but there are more sports people coming in and selling collectibles at comics conventions. There's tattoo artists that are coming in. We're seeing a lot of crossover with music and things like that. And I think it's really cool when different fandoms can come together and kind of find what's similar about them. We've started covering
Yeah.
music and different things on the site because of that. Because all of these different things, people are super passionate about something that makes you a nerd. There's baseball nerds, there's card nerds, and that's just it is what it is. And when you start to recognize that we're kind of the same community and have some, people who like comics are also going to like other things, so it just makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I
um
think point in case here is I have I collect a lot of non-sport cards. So
mm,
there's a little glare there, but there's Batman cards from the 60s. And I just think that's like the coolest thing. And so, yes, I collect sport cards forever, but now my collection is actually mostly grown into non-sport cards. And this is a low graded card. It's only a 2 out of 10, but it's still a pretty value. It's worth maybe $150, whereas a 10 is worth, maybe 100,000 or something crazy. But,
right.
I think there's pretty much anything you're into now. Like there's so many collectible options, whether that's cards or comics or, um,
Shoes.
you know, shoes. Yeah, there's like so many endless opportunities to collect if you got the collector gene.
Mhm. Well, and you talked about non sports related cards, and it's funny now because a lot
Yeah.
of the card sets come with just super bizarre artifacts in there, like a strand of Lincoln's hair, like a piece of the latex that made
Yeah.
Slimer and Ghostbusters. Like, what is that all about?
I don't know. I mean, that started, this is something we cover in the documentary as well, is kind of like the evolution of cards. So in the 90s, when I started collecting, when a lot of people started collecting, what happened is that there was so much overprinting. It's now called the junk wax era, because there was
Mhm.
millions of every single card being printed. And so people had that Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, or Barry Bond, whoever it might be, and they were like so hyped, thinking it was going to go up in value so much over time, and it's still a valuable card. But then they realized, like, and they would maybe have 5 or 6 or 7 of them and think like, oh, these are going to be like, get me, pay for my college later on in life. Well, it turns out everyone had 5, 6, 7,
Mhm.
maybe 10, 15 of them. Um, and so what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s, began to evolve, where they started to put pieces of jersey, like game used
Mhm.
jersey, and then autographs on cards. Not you could always get your own card autograph, but now it was like done via the actual creators of the card, the companies that make them, and so they were like officially licensed, and pieces, artifacts. So that kind of started in that world of sports cards, where I think you could then get a LeBron James rookie card with his autograph and a piece of his jersey from his
Mhm.
rookie year,
Right.
insanely valuable. And they would limit to the number. They would put serial numbers on them. So the whole idea is like, okay, we had all this overprinting. So now what do we do to still create value and in a sense of scarcity in these cards? Well, we like up
Mhm.
the ante. And so, yeah, there's these sets that have random artifacts from the past, whether it's cut signatures from
Mhm.
presidents or strands of hair, or there's some Harry Potter card sets that have pieces of the wardrobe, or a
Mhm.
little piece of the sorcerer's stone prop, or like they embed these things in the cards, and then they put serial numbers in the back, so like, okay, well, there's only 100 of this specific type of card, and that makes it a desirable collectible for people that can sort of quantify that.
Right. So the controlled scarcity is a big part of the market, and the manufacturers are very aware of this now. And speaking of controlled scarcity, and I mean, one of the biggest card sales in history right now, and in just everybody knows about it, is Post Malone and the One Ring, right? So Post Malone purchased this card. There's only one ever made, and they advertise the crap out of it. And just because it is the only one, how many millions of dollars did he pay for that thing?
I don't know the exact number on that, but it was enough money that this is one of those things, right? Where I think that type of chase is cool because it ups the ante, it gets people excited, theoretically, it gets more people into buying a product maybe they wouldn't buy before. And you have someone like Post Malone, who is like a cool pop culture, icon, getting involved and he was already involved in Magic the Gathering. That's why he wanted that. But I mean, I think to me that's exciting, and that grows the hobby. And shouldn't that be the point, that it grows it? But plenty of people complain that like that made it harder to get for people who are diehard Magic the Gathering
Mhm.
fans. But I mean, I just think that ultimately, in the long run, what we'd like to do is get as many people involved as possible in this world because it's fun. It's fun to collect. Nostalgia is something that grounds us in times of uncertainty and gives us a sense of connection to our past. And I think there's great value there. It's things you can pass down if you have children. It's something you can do with them and get them involved. And it just gives people a sense of history in a way that I think is really valuable.
No, it is. It's great. And speaking of, celebrities kind of bringing up the nerdy stuff and like making it popular. We got Todd Stashwick who plays Dungeons and Dragons, and Manganiello and Matthew Lillard, and all these guys who are like into things, and they're like letting their nerdy fandoms show. And I think that's really great for the different groups that are out there that are into tabletop role playing or into baseball cards or whatever. Like that's really awesome. Another one is, and you also mentioned this one in the documentary, is oh, what's his name, the YouTube star that's wrestling now that got the card.
Logan Paul.
That's the one, Logan
Yeah.
Paul. And I remember seeing him at I was Royal Rumble or something like that, coming out with the card around his neck, and I asked my kid what's that. He's like, "Oh, that's that card." He totally knew everything about it. My kid's 10.
Yeah, yeah. So Logan Paul has spent so much money on Pokemon cards, and one of the characters we have in the documentary, Super Duper Danny Sanchez is their name, and they are incredible Pokemon collector. And so we kind of looked through that lens. We only mentioned Logan briefly. He's not like a subject in our documentary, but he was a big part of the controversy going on because he spent like $6 million on a case of the first edition Pokemon cards that turned out were actually faked boxes resealed with GI Joe cards in them.
Wow.
Um, and I think he got his money back. That changed hands from this person to that person. But we just briefly, amongst the kind of wildness that went on in the peak of these prices going out of control, that's kind of mentioned as a part of that world. But really, we do a deep dive into Danny's story, because Danny's been doing this since they were 13 years old, streaming on
Mhm.
YouTube, collecting Pokemon cards that you would see opening packs from back in the day that are now worth $20,000, $30,000, just like opening them and being all kind of crazy with them and looking back and cringing at their old video, like, oh my God, that card, I should have been more careful with it.
Mhm.
And it's just a cool story getting to follow Danny out in Los Angeles, and making trades in the Pokemon world. I mean, that's such a fascinating world too. I had no idea that Pokemon was, that franchise is like bigger than the Marvel franchise, for
Mhm.
example.
Oh yeah.
That's
Oh yeah.
how giant that world is. And so that's a fierce, heavy collecting community that is a part of this documentary as well.
Well, and you mentioned Danny, and the whole thing that I was watching there was like, they're collecting and they're doing it for profit, but they're also doing it for fun, and they're also doing it for their show. And the thing is, they have such a great attitude of like, I had this money in my hand and now I don't, and or this could be worth $300,000, but because of this little ding in it, it's graded a 9 instead of a 10, so now it's worth about 30 grand or whatever, and just that loss of $270,000. It just they take it so well, because it's just part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, Danny, like I said, we try to keep the debate in the film about the collectors and this new growth. Not even a debate, but the conversation going about kind of how that is. We're on the real sort of forefront of that growth happening that really is changing this whole world of the hobby.
Mhm.
And Danny really truly represented the collector in that sense. I mean, Danny does make a living off of being a Pokemon. I don't want to say influencer because I'm sure Danny cringes at that a little bit, but Danny's well known online,
Mhm.
But Danny truly loves those cards. And when a lot of people would talk about the value of their cards openly, Danny would kind of cringe. We would ask, because Danny's like, look, I love these cards. Like
Mhm.
the fact that they happen to be valuable that I've collected forever, that's cool, I guess. But like at the end of the day, like this is a part of me. This is what I've done forever, and I just love being a part of this community. And I think that's what's also cool about any hobby is that now more than ever, it's so easy to be connected to the
Mhm.
community of the hobby, and other collectors and other hobbyists at these conventions and shows and stuff, and online where there's a true community, and it's a part of people's everyday lives in a way that's really enriching.
Right on. Right on. Cool. So I've been given the warning by producer Eric over there that we're running out of time here. So I just want to say again, it's called The Hobby. It's going to be on streaming services on February 16th. It's a fantastic film. I got to watch a screener of it, and I feel like you really encapsulated this culture to let people know. Like I said, most people have an idea that baseball cards can be worth money, but I don't think they realize just all the kind of cutthroat stuff that's happening and the value and just different markets. And it's a commodity now, and that is absolutely bonkers. But the film does a great job. Thank you very much for coming on and talking a little bit about it, and look forward to hearing what some of our readers and fans have to say about the film after this goes up.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys the hobby like you did.